Welcome to The Pulse, a podcast that dives deep into biotech stories and features biotech leaders. I'm one of your co-hosts, Yosef Baidi.
I'm your other co-host, Fang here.
This podcast is brought to you by the Harvard Biotech Club, a student-led, Harvard-affiliated biotech organization, which is on a mission to bridge the gap between academia and industry.
Today's guest is Luke Timmerman. Luke is a journalist, author, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. Luke has a bachelor's in journalism from the University of Wisconsin, and he was awarded as a Knight Science Journalism Fellowship at MIT. Luke has been covering biotech since 2001. He wrote about industry of the Seattle Times, Bloomberg News, and Economy. He founded the Timmerman Report in 2015, which is an independent biotech publication dedicated to providing timely, in-depth analysis. In addition, he launched and began hosting The Long Run, a biotech podcast that has been released almost 200 episodes since. Luke was named one of the 100 most influential people in biotechnology by Scientific American in 2015. Luke has won a number of prizes for his reporting, including the Scripps Howard National Journalism Award, the Society of American Business Editors and Writers Awards, and the Association of Healthcare Journalists Award. He is a regular commentator on KUOW, Seattle's public radio station, and is a frequent speaker and moderator at biotech industry events. Luke is also the author of Hood, Trailblazer of the Genomics Age, a biography of Leroy Hood. The book was called a must-read by Forbes and named one of the 100 best indie books of 2015 by Kirkus Reviews. Welcome to our show, Luke.
Thanks, Fang and Yosef, for having me.
Yeah, thanks. We're so excited to have you come out to Boston for this interview.
Yeah. Tell us about your upbringing, where you're from.
Yeah, so I grew up on a small family farm in southwestern Wisconsin, about maybe 10, 15 miles from the Mississippi River, hill country, kind of a working class, blue collar background.
Oh, cool. And then I guess you grew up on the farm, and then in terms of like careers, I guess your family primarily working on the farm. Did you have family working in like journalism, for instance? Kind of what was there something in your adolescence that kind of got you into that?
No, that took a while, but my dad grew up on a farm. My mom did too. And they go back multiple generations in that part of the country, the upper Midwest. My mom was on the Iowa side, actually. But my dad worked through some different blue-collar labor jobs. He was a welder at John Deere in Dubuque, Iowa for a number of years when I was a little kid, and then had to reinvent himself a couple of times. He worked on the farm, but in order to earn extra income, he was a truck driver for many years as I was a kid and afterwards. And my mom worked on various clerical jobs, administrative assistant type work.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I imagine they kind of had like a formative experience on you, like seeing your family working these like blue collar jobs kind of instilled a certain kind of mentality.
For sure. A hard work ethic. I had a lot of work to do, chores every day that family was depending on me to feed the pigs, clean the pens, bale hay in the summer, shovel corn so that the animals had
How many siblings do you have?
I have a younger sister, 3 years younger, so it was just her and I.
Okay. That's really cool. And I imagine, with all the work, it's like you probably get used to like being a morning person, like working early in the morning and late in the night, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, as a kid, I didn't think that I had a lot of advantages. I definitely saw, the dentist kid, for instance, that I go to school, like they can afford the nicer things. But I did well in school, and my parents really emphasized get a good education. Education was the path to upward mobility, and so you got to apply yourself in school. But do your chores too. And I think that actually was a real favor they did me. It served me well when I went into the work world.
Did you get interest in journalism when you were young? Yeah.
So I'm on this farm, right? And there weren't a lot of other people around. There was a kid. There were kids across the road that I could play with, but it was kind of isolated, and so I watched probably too much television, to be honest. And one of the things that I would watch was just the evening news, like what's going on around the world and in the Middle East. And here I am in this kind of isolated place in the upper Midwest. I was curious, and so I didn't really imagine becoming a journalist. That came later on the high school paper, and then eventually in college. I decided that, boy, I'm really curious about a lot of things, about how the world works, and journalism is kind of like a license to go out and ask questions of just about anybody, what they do. And I found that really fun and interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point.
That's
and
really...
kind of like you said, it's like you could be anywhere in the world and hear what's happening on the completely other side, and really opens this information that you wouldn't have been able to know otherwise.
Yeah.
Cool. So then you got interested, or you kind of pursued that interest in college, and you mentioned you worked in like the school newspaper in high school and then college as well?
It was in high school that I worked on the school newspaper, became editor. I was interested in sports at that time, and playing sports and then writing about other sports. It was fun. In college, I continued to do the sports writing for my hometown newspaper, so I could actually get paid, as opposed to being on the college paper where you're just kind of getting publications to put on your resume. So I got paid, and I could pay for my school tuition, and that was all good, and a little spending money. I eventually got tired of writing about sports. It kind of took some of the fun out of the game, and so I started exploring other things like local government and business, politics, and I've been doing it ever since.
It's really cool. Was there like you said you were also interested in playing sports too. Was there like a favorite sport you like to play, or you kind of just really loved playing sports and would go out and do everything?
I played baseball, a little bit of basketball. I was too short to be any good. But I like getting out with my friends.
Cool. And then, so you had this kind of experience working. I guess you had some experience while in college working for your local newspaper. But after college, you had your first kind of, like, I guess, big job, which was working at as a journalist at the Seattle Times. So obviously, it was a great newspaper, but you had primarily lived in Wisconsin, the Midwest. How was that making that transition to move to the West Coast after college? Yeah,
so this is how life takes strange twists and turns. I wanted to be a newspaper reporter. So this is the 1990s. People still read newspapers. They were the primary outlets for original reporting. So that was where it was at. And at the time, everyone said, you have to do internships. You have to get published works in professional newspapers to build a portfolio that you can then use to get your first job. And so I did a few of those summer internships, or one in the fall around the Midwest. And my big break, I guess, was to get a summer internship at the Seattle Times. So this is way on the other side of the country. I mean, I had only been on an airplane once, all the way through college. And so I get in my car, I drive all the way to Seattle, and I'm seeing the Great Plains and the mountains of Montana, and then the Cascades. And it's like, wow, the ocean is here now. And I got there, and I love the natural environment, as you could tell, but the newspaper was also just a superb place, full of, they just won a couple of Pulitzer Prizes that year, 1997, when I got my internship. So the place was just loaded with experienced reporters, editors, photographers, graphic design. It was a great place to just absorb the craft and learn.
Okay, what type of news did you cover at the Seattle Times?
So I started out just like a lot of beginning reporters on general assignment. You hear something on the cop scanner, and like, there's a protest down at City Hall, and the editor says, go check it out and call me in a half hour. What's going on? So I would go do that kind of stuff. I love that. And I found that I could take relatively arcane or complicated subject material and translate it into plain English. So that was kind of a fundamental skill of all journalism, really. And so I just ranged around, tried a bunch of things, eventually settled on business, general business.
Okay. General business. So I think where you also started your biotech news report, journalism.
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. So the Seattle Times actually had a strike. And I had just gotten hired about a year prior, so I was the low man on the totem pole in the union seniority. So I would have been the first guy to lose his job. It was a very vulnerable time. A lot of people left. I stuck around. Frankly, I didn't have a lot of other options. And remember, I was just covering general business. I didn't have much of a portfolio or anything. And so when I came back, they had a bunch of openings, and there were two of them in particular that the business editor talked to me about at the time. One of them was retail in Seattle. And so Seattle was the home of Starbucks, Costco, Nordstrom, category-defining, interesting, creative retailers. REI. Actually, Amazon was not quite Amazon at that time, and it was seen as more of a tech company. But anyway, retail was sort of a high-profile beat, and the other one that I was offered was biotech. And biotech, I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I had not studied biology or anything in college. Nobody at the newspaper really seemed to know very much about it, other than it was in the news a lot. The Human Genome Project was big national news. The governor of Washington at the time was making a lot of noise about biotech being one of these industries of the 21st century that we as a state really ought to invest in and nurture. So the editors thought, okay, this is kind of an important area. We should have somebody who covers it. And but nobody really. So I was sort of, I had this option. And I looked at biotech, didn't know anything about it, but it had science, it had medicine, there was business, there were interesting characters, like who are these people that start these companies and how can they get by losing money for years and years and years? I mean, it was kind of puzzling, and it also changed really quickly. So there wasn't one big company that dominated the whole thing, and I'd just be writing the rest of my life about Boeing got some new planes ordered from Singapore or something. It would be the same story over and over. So I thought, I want to give this thing a try, and that was, like you said, 2001. I got started.
Yeah. So what's the transition like to working in the biotech news? When you're coming into the industry as an outsider, there's definitely a lot of jargons, a lot of things really unfamiliar with. Yeah, how do you handle with that? Yeah.
It was terrifying at first. I had no idea what I was doing, being thrown into the deep end of the pool. I'd read these press releases, and I didn't understand them. Like, I couldn't even tell if it was good news or bad news. It kind of looked like bad news, but the company says it's good news. I mean, so, and I'd spend time on the phone calling people, like, help me understand this. And I luckily had enough time and space on the newspaper at the time. We only had to publish one newspaper a day, and our deadline was generally about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So if news broke in the morning or in the middle of the afternoon, I could make a bunch of phone calls. I could sort of make some sense of it and distill it into a readable format for your general lay reader. I didn't need to understand it in great depth, but just enough. And I guess had the guts to put myself out there and make some mistakes, which I'm sure I did. I'd probably cringe if I went back and read some of those early stories, but I was really fortunate that I had a platform to just get out there and learn on the job.
That's really cool. And I imagine like a lot of it's like talking to experts. So was that something that took a while to get comfortable with, like reaching out to these experts, or was it kind of something you just went right into to be like, okay, I'm going to interview this CEO or talk to this person?
Yeah, I'm not shy about calling people, and I think that's just sort of part of being a journalist. You can call the mayor and ask them hard questions, even when you're 23 years old. That's just part of the craft attitude, I guess, is that we get to ask the questions. And so I wasn't afraid about that. I was afraid about getting things wrong, or just not putting them in the right context, or just kind of missing the point. There's a lot of different ways you can screw up. I was worried about that.
That's a fair point. And then you mentioned like at this time it's very exciting because the Human Genome Project's finished and like the first draft is done. So you wrote a book about one of the pioneers for the genomics era, Lee Hood. called, and the book was Hood, Trailblazer, the Genomics Age. So was this at this point you really got interested in learning more about this field, and what got you so interested in Lee Hood's contributions to the field to, write a book about him, which takes a lot of time?
Yeah, so there's a long story there. He was one of the key people that I got to meet right when I started on the biotech beat at the Seattle Times. So at the time, Seattle was strong in cancer research and immunology. The big company in town was Immunex, and they had developed Enbrel, which to this day is still one of the very best-selling pharmaceuticals of all time. The original TNF inhibitor, now marketed by Amgen. And that's another story. I got to cover the big business story of the time, which was Amgen acquiring Immunex, which was like Seattle's Genentech. That was a big deal. But back to Hood, he was just one of those people who was a mover and shaker in town. Bill Gates had recruited him from Caltech after he had developed the first automated DNA sequencer to create a department of molecular biotechnology at the University of Washington. And part of that deal was that he was going to create companies like Applied Biosystems, and these were going to be great companies that were going to drive the economy in the greater Seattle area and advance the field of biology. So he was just a man to watch, and he had started his own independent institute, and so I got to know him. I got to spend a lot of time with him, and he was just a force of nature. I mean, a really brilliant and extremely driven individual as a scientific entrepreneur.
It's really great. I imagine it's really nice to like get to talk to this person as they're still making all these big discoveries, because it's like you could read in the past about it, but you get to see it as it was happening.
Yeah, for sure. I think I caught some of that entrepreneurial bug. It's being around these people. It can be kind of contagious, and so I just met him. I talked to him. I'd follow his career, wanted to know more, and he and others in that Seattle community were quite generous with their time, letting a young, novice journalist come hang around the lab and learn about what they do.
That's really cool to hear. And then, so you mentioned catching this entrepreneurial bug. So kind of around this time, you started your own news outlet, the Timmerman Report. So kind of what was your motivation to start this? Because it's something that could be very intimidating to start your own company.
Well, that came up quite a bit later. So I was at Seattle Times for 6.5 or so years. Around this time, newspapers were going through their existential crisis, disappearing. And so here I was about 30 years old, and I realized if I want to continue doing journalism, in particular biotech journalism, I'm going to need to find some other place to do it. I went to Bloomberg News for a while, which was very successful, and remains, with a strong business model around selling to a specific audience of financial professionals. I was there for a little while. Then I went to a startup called Xconomy, and I was there for about 5-6 years. And so there, as an early employee, not the founder, but an early employee, I was part of building something. And really, my day job was to cover the startup community, which again, I love doing. I love learning about a discovery and then how it gets translated into a product, how it gets financed, how people figure out how to turn it into something useful for patients. So I'm studying other people and how they build companies, while I'm also in my own journalistic outlet figuring out, well, how do we create our own sustainable business model? And so I learned quite a bit there. And I got to this junction back to Hood where I wanted to write a book. And I think a lot of journalists get to this fork in the road where you've done a whole lot of the daily journalism, this just in breaking news, plus the occasional longer form feature story that takes a little more time and effort, a few more phone calls. So that's satisfying too. But there's certain kinds of stories that you can never get to when the bullets are flying during daily deadlines. And a book, I thought Hood had a book-worthy story. His life in science, but also the development of the automated DNA sequencer was a major event for the growth of the whole industry and ushering in the genomics age and personalized medicine. So and nobody had done it, so I wanted to write that book. And because I had known him for 10 years prior, I thought I'm pretty well positioned, and so I made that proposal to him. Needed to take some time between. So I took some time. I actually quit my job, kind of a risky thing, figuring like, okay, I'm going to finish this book. and then I'll figure something else out. Like
Oh,
I'll either
wow.
go to work for a big media company after I'm done, or I'll start my own thing. I was beginning to think about, well, how would I do my own company if I were the founder? What business model would I want? And that was sort of how I got thinking about Timmerman Report.
Oh wow, that's really cool. And like
Yeah.
two very different career options, at this point.
Well, yeah, one would be perceived as less risky. Taking the job at the big company would have been perceived as less risky.
for sure.
However, I'm not going to name that media company, but it is not around anymore or not what it used to be, and Timmerman Report is still here. So I think starting Timmerman Report for sure was a very risky option for a whole bunch of reasons, but sometimes the big company, if it's on a kind of a shaky foundation, it isn't always, even though they might have health benefits and all that from the first day, it's not necessarily the safer option.
That's a good point. And then, these big companies are covering different types of news. And at this point in 2015, you started Timmerman Report. And then other kind of news outlets were also starting. I think Stat was in 2015 and then in Points News in 2016. So a lot of people were getting this idea. So how did you approach, because there's other people kind of getting into this game as well, to differentiate yourself from these other
from
outlets?
others.
Well, actually, I was the first of those that you mentioned. So I was thinking about this in the fall of 2014. My own independent solopreneur, they didn't use that term then, but solo entrepreneur venture. There was no Substack at that time, so there were not a lot of people doing it. At the time, the business model for online news and journalism was click-through based advertising. So you needed to reach a very large audience, and they needed to be highly engaged on your platform for a certain amount of time in order to sell Toyotas or iPhones or whatever it is the advertisers want. And so you saw models like, say, a Huffington Post or BuzzFeed. They were out there. But subscription-based publications in which readers were paying for the journalism, that was just not really a common thing. And plenty of people told me that was a dumb idea, that was a thing of the past, that the ship had sailed, and that I was I needed to think of some other model. But Stat and others came later. But I did have a good track record and a lot of relationships from my time at Xconomy. So I thought, if I offer people a fair bargain, like a low-priced subscription for a high-value targeted audience of biotech professionals, something like $99 a year when I started. Would people just buy it on the confidence that I would deliver value to them over the course of a full year of being a subscriber? And it turned out it worked. There were something like 300 people that signed up in the first month, and that gave me the confidence that, I wasn't yet viable then, but I thought, okay, at least the concept is fundamentally okay. Like, this is something I can build on.
99 1 year, right? Yeah.
$99 for 1 year.
Okay.
And that if I could get to, and the simple math was, if I could get to 1,000 subscribers, that would be $100,000 worth of revenue from individual readers. And, after you pay your taxes and whatever expenses it is for your servers and all that, I would have enough to, pay the bills for my family.
So what are the demographics within the community that subscribers do you have, like, are they mostly VC or investment people, or just like from academia or a pharma subscribing?
Yeah, there's a mix. It's primarily, I would say, members of the biotech startup community. A lot of management teams, so CEO, CFO, head of business development, head of R&D, communications, finance, those kind of people at companies. Some of the large pharma R&D and business development people whose job it is to focus on the startup community, the most innovative segment of biotech. That's really where I've tried to carve out my niche, not in coverage of large companies that are already fairly well covered by other media. So nobody needs me to write another story about Pfizer or Merck or Johnson & Johnson. Those are, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Reuters, they're covering their major events. But these little companies that very few people have heard of are often the ones doing the most innovative things. And again, coming back to the business model, I'm not going to get 1 million page views by writing about Editas medicine when it's 10 people.
Yeah.
But I can learn something. These people are really interesting, and it's valuable to a subset of the industry. So that's where I try to operate, and those are the kinds of readers, the people who are interested in that sort of thing, are the ones who come to Timmerman Report.
It's a good point. It's like, how do you get your own niche, and like how do you make sure like you're targeting those people that like will subscribe to your outlet?
Yeah.
Cool. And then I'm not sure if this was around this time, but we were kind of looking more into, I got into podcasting and saw you were involved with the Signal podcast with Stat. So how did you go about getting involved with that?
Well, you go way back, Harry. I'm impressed. The Signal podcast was a production of Stat. So interestingly enough, this was probably 6 months after I had started Timmerman Report, and I had confidence that I had achieved viability. Like, I wasn't crazy. I didn't need to, go out and find another job. This was going to work. And around that time, Rick Burke of Stat, the co-founder and executive editor, gives me a call and says, I'd like to talk with you about how you can work with us. And I said, well, one idea that I've been playing with that I haven't been able to pursue on my own yet is the thought of a podcast. And I thought, well, maybe if I could find a partner, we could do something together, maybe talking about the week's news in a kind of a talk show format. He didn't really want that so much, but I suggested Meg Terrell as my partner because she was someone who had covered biotech at Bloomberg. She came in behind me after I had left Bloomberg, and so I got to know Meg professionally, and I respected her work. I thought, okay, why don't two of us come together? And he liked that. And so two of us came together and created that Signal podcast. And we modeled that a little bit after some of the popular radio, like professionally produced radio shows at the time, Radio Lab, This American Life. What if we could do a 20-minute focused, scripted show about a given interesting topic at the time in biotech? So we did that, and we had some fun with that.
Yeah, no, they looked great, and I guess like you had this interest in getting into podcasting, and I imagine that kind of you maybe had the bug already for podcasting, but maybe you wanted to continue it. So from this experience working on the Signal podcast with Stack, was this the inspiration for starting your own podcast, which we know now is The Long Run?
Yes. So I had to stay nimble with changing media platforms of the time. So, I mean, as you learned, I grew up on the written word, text on printed paper, and then it became written word on the internet, and you could make revisions. You could do things real quick. It was much more high speed, high tempo. Podcasting was coming into its own around that time, and I had developed some experience and some comfort with live interviewing of people at conferences, on stage, and really a radio interview is not all that different. You need to be able to listen in the moment, ask follow-up questions, some of what you guys are doing right here, actually. I thought, why don't I try this out? So podcasting with the Signal podcast. I also did, as you referenced, a bunch of guest appearances with the local public radio station, KOW in Seattle. So I got more experience, more comfortable with the audio, the spoken word. And yes, when the Signal podcast went away, this was early 2017, I thought, okay, I see some reasons. I mean, do you want to get into some of the business reasons why that didn't work? So we got to something like 10,000 listeners at the time, and but there were 4 people working on this thing, and it was quite a bit of production work, and that wasn't a large enough audience to justify all of the work that went into it. So I thought, well, what if I did something? If this is going away, I can do something myself. The tools are available online. I just need to get a little practice with publishing them, or maybe I can get a sound editor to help me out with some of the finer points. But if I do single interviews, like up close interviews in a long format, I think that would lower the production costs and still reach about that same size of audience, people who are interested in this sort of thing. And that could be a viable thing that I could do for the long run.
That's a good point. It's like finding a niche, because that's something we've experienced ourselves, because now there's so many podcasts. It's like, how do you go about differentiating yourself and finding something that's interesting, and then strategizing, thinking like, how are you going to get your listeners?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I had that audience. I was pretty comfortable that I understood who they were and what they were interested in. And the audio storytelling format, I thought there are a lot of people who have interesting biographies that lead them to this moment of possibility in medicine. And I thought there's a lot of potential for audio storytelling here. Who are these people? How did they get to where they are? And what is it that they're doing that, if successful, will really change the world in a pretty positive way?
It's a good point. And you mentioned like wanting to really get this single guest, or maybe two guests in some cases, and really explore like in this like long set of interview. And then for your first interview, you got to speak with John Maraganore, who is a very exciting story. And you mentioned in the beginning of the intro of this, wanting to talk more about biotech and the perception people have of industry, such as drug pricing. So you kind of mentioned a little bit about your idea for starting the podcast, but was this something you wanted to go about? Like, how do we demystify the biotech industry for people who want to know more about it, since in some ways it can be very mysterious for people who are on the outside?
Yes. So going back to the very beginning, I've always thought about how to foster greater public understanding of biotech. Now, just saying that right now, at this moment, it's kind of hard to hear myself say, because I can't say that I or all of science journalism has done a great job of that. We work, we try. There are other things going on that are beyond our control. But yes, I did think that by making these people, by humanizing the guests in the beginning, that I could foster greater understanding of what, because there's some universality to it. Like, where did you grow up? What did your mom and dad do? What kinds of things, what were your favorite subjects in school? Like, these are questions that everyone growing up has to navigate and deal with. So now, instead of just talking about some, egghead brainiac who knows this thing about CRISPR that, you've never even heard of, and it scares you, right? And you turn off the channel. Well, now all of a sudden, this is a real human being who wrestled with some issue and kind of stumbled into a field. Well, that's a universal human experience. And if you can if you can grab along with my hand in those first few minutes, like, this is an interesting person that I kind of want to get to know, well, then I hope that you might stay with me when we get into a little bit more of the science and why that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good point. I feel like in news, often the case, it's like the celebrities that they cover to humanize are usually like athletes, musicians, actresses, actors. So I think it's really cool that you could do this with scientists who, historically haven't been covered in these type of kind of interviews, and humanize them as well.
Yeah. And, you mentioned John was the first guest, and that's one of the great things. I mean, this was a brand new thing, and I'm just testing it out. And I said to John, I've got this idea, and like a real entrepreneur, he just runs with it. He says, yeah, let's do it. And so he took that risk. How can I help? And it's just that's what an entrepreneurial community is about. It's about opening doors, making introductions, being willing to try new things, support other people in their ventures.
Yusuf and I have been among your listener and the Long Run podcast, and they know your signature questions every time. It's like, where you're from, where your upbringing, where your parents do. So we start from the same way today.
Yeah.
Well, I hope I'm not too predictable. Throw in a few surprises here and there.
Yeah, I think that's you making the Long Run as really your own personality and your own style. That's great. And we know you call your podcast a long run. People in the field can, I think, it didn't even to explain. People in the field can understand because this is a long and high risky journey to develop life-changing medicine, or even just regular medicine.
Yeah.
Why have you learned from interviewing almost 200 guests about why they are so driven to work in the area that is so challenging, so difficult, and also obvious highly regulated? Yeah.
Well, this is a highly diverse industry. It draws people from all around the world, very talented people. I think the mission is a real hook for a lot of people. Just to think that you could come up with a new treatment for cancer, or a new antibiotic, or something that diagnoses Alzheimer's early and gives people some hope that they might be able to ward it off or live a healthier life for a longer period of time. I mean, that right there. I mean, there are a lot of things that people can work on, but I think increasingly people are drawn to really meaningful mission type work. Because if you're going to work these long hours and make all kinds of sacrifices for a professional life, I mean, most people kind of want it to amount to something in the end. And maybe not everything's going to work out, but even taking a shot at it is worth it. So I find that through line characteristic in a whole lot of the guests. And, of course, people have to have some intellectual ability to even begin in this area. So, everybody's smart. But there's a resilience, a steeliness to really stick with it and roll with the punches on the good days and the not good days. I find that really appealing. I like being around it. I hope that I can maybe even model that in some ways.
Yeah, that is a good point. It's even though they're all very different and working on different science, it's good to see there's these common characteristics or common traits you see from their personal lives that come into why they're so good at their job in terms of being scientists or executives.
Yeah, I mean, they present well, they sound good, look good, and all that, but everybody's had their hard times, their low moments, and I actually get to draw some of that out in the Long Run podcast. And coming back to that point about humanization, we have a lot of things in common, and that's one of them.
It's cool. And then, you've interviewed almost 200 guests on your podcast, and, all the guests and interviews are great, but would you be able to tell us a little bit about what's the most interesting interview you've had, or kind of maybe more eventful, something that stuck out to you from one of the interviews?
Boy, I mean, so many that I've enjoyed. I had Amy Abernethy on pretty early on before she went to the FDA, thinking about how we gather evidence, how we know what we know. And that's a long-running challenge. We have, of course, the randomized controlled trials, and those are very important for securing FDA approvals and that. But there's a lot more to the story, a lot more possibility now with data and technology. And maybe I should have her back on a few years later and talk about how much progress we've made or still have to go. Carolyn Bertozzi was on my show before she won the Nobel Prize, so that's always kind of good. Same with David Baker. I enjoy getting to talk to people who are really creative, innovative people before the whole world gets to become aware. I've got that front row seat to history. Who knows? There might be a few more future Nobelists. So.
Yeah. It's always great to schedule it before. It's probably so hard to schedule an interview after.
Right. I'm happy when they take my calls after.
That's probably for the journalism, for the sports, also have that prediction, right? You have this sense also in the biotech.
Yeah, who's going to be the next great, basketball player is going to be the next great scientist.
Well, actually, so I've had a few that are, post their most famous moments. So like Phil Sharp or David Baltimore, that older generation too, have been on the show. And I think what a lot of these people have in common, they really do want to engage with that wider public. and I do too. I'm thinking about it all the time. Ways in which we can do a better job of telling the story, explaining the science, the impact that it might have. And I know there's a lot of we've dropped a bunch of names. A lot of these people are really interested in thinking about how to do that. Maybe coming on shows like this is another way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a great point, because you recently celebrated the 10-year anniversary for the Timmerman Report, and part of that is I had these celebrations, one on the East Coast in Boston, and one of the people, speakers and roasters that was there was Vicky Sato, who was on your podcast as well. And first she commended you for your reliable fact-checking news, but talked a little bit about challenging you to speak to a wider base of people. So do you kind of mention thinking about this in terms of getting that with the Timmerman Report in the long run, but is this something where you've kind of gotten these actionable objectives of how do you reach this wider audience?
Well, as an entrepreneur, as my own boss, I get to think about this. And so I am thinking about how to reach different audiences. The media landscape has changed a lot in my whole career. We've covered a lot of this ground, but a lot of people are interested in video now. I haven't really done a lot of video. I've done some stand-up interviews at conferences, but I don't really want to travel the whole world and interview people. That it's time-consuming, expensive. I have a family. I have other things I want to do. So, but using video to meet audiences where they are is a worthy project. Thinking about it, it doesn't always have to be the long run style interview. It could just be perhaps me just talking about a story that I just wrote on Monday that I'm really excited about, and I wrote 900 words about on Timmerman Report for a professional inside audience, and then I take the bones of that story and present it in a more palatable format for a lay audience, or say high school kids or middle school kids, where I can convey some of the curiosity and the excitement that I feel. That's the reason why I wrote that story for the professional audience, but maybe it just needs to be presented in a little different way. So these are the kind of lines I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think you have these long formats which are very informative and great, but now with social media we've seen tweetorials be a good way to get info out, or with TikTok, for instance, people love watching these short videos and getting info. So I think it goes to show it's good to think about that, because some people might not want to read a long article. Some people like the shorter formats as well.
Yeah, yeah. And if I need to invest in a special lighting or camera, or get some makeup, it's okay, maybe. Yeah. I guess one thing you said at this your celebration of the Timmerman Report was after Vicky had said, speaking to wider audience, you were joking about, should you be on Joe Rogan? So is this something you'd be open to do, speaking in more mainstream news outlets, or an outlet such as Joe Rogan's, or there's a completely different demographic compared to the normal audience you speak to, which is scientists? Yeah, I have actually spent a fair bit of time listening to Joe Rogan on long runs, or putting on a heavy backpack and going uphill, and I cringe at some of the things that people say about science, and I'm pretty comfortable with a wide range of subjects, and I can speak plain English. I can translate a lot of the most exciting developments in science to a wide audience. Now, whether it's on his show or someone else's, a few other people have suggested I try to go on other people's shows, like Jon Stewart, for instance, or something like that. And I might consider something like that. Here I am talking with you guys, and I expect that you'll be reaching a similar type of demographic to the one that I already reach. And now that's good. I mean, it won't all be the same. There will be some people who will hear this, and it'll be new. But to really jump that chasm to a broader audience will take something like that, the courage to go out there and mix it up, and maybe get a little bit embarrassed, or stumble over a line, or regret that, gee, I maybe should have said this a little bit differently, I didn't anticipate stepping on a landmine by saying, the MMR vaccine is safe. But so it takes some time and effort, some preparation, some courage to enter those arenas. But it's somebody has to do it.
Yeah, we think someone has to do it, and if you would do it, I think you do a great job, because I think you're someone that's very able to clearly kind of communicate it to scientists and non-scientists. I think there'd be a lot of good if speak to other audiences.
Yeah, following up on you just mentioned that the media landscape changed dramatically, but we realized that also for journalist reporter actually has more impactful to the population, because like people have been heard if like doing, for example, Joe Reagan, they have said something, some people believe in that. Yeah, so I think that's really different time. Yeah.
Yeah, back in the days of newspapers, we used to believe that we were reaching the mass audience. Now, maybe we were, maybe we weren't. We didn't have great network metrics on that, but for sure we could see that local television and local radio would amplify the reports that we did. And now things are just much more fragmented. People are existing in lots of different echo chambers and silos. And so now I have needed to play in my own niche or echo chamber in order to create a sustainable business, which I have done. So I'm not sure what the business might be in me reaching out to. I don't necessarily think there is. I think of it as more of just a public service of something that I should do, someone else should do, all of us should do. And we can start small, too, by talking to our friends and family, neighbors, and asking questions of them, not just lecturing or scoffing or eye rolling, or and I'm guilty of some of these things too. When I hear some things that I like, about the mRNA vaccine altering people's DNA. Well, I know that isn't true, and so, but it just requires some patience to engage.
That's exactly true. And then another little anecdote from your this 10-year anniversary celebration. You kind of, for part of this, you had guests roast you, which is interesting because you said you were inspired by Tom Brady's roast and you wanted to have that for yourself. So we were wondering, like, why'd you decide to have this for your event? Were you a little worried about the jokes people were going to make during these roasts?
Well, first of all, I had this idea before I actually watched it. And I'm pretty sure that if I had Nikki Glaser there, she would have drawn blood. But I thought it would be fun and interesting, something different than the usual industry conference, that people could have some fun and I could take a joke. I joke that I haven't given as much ammunition to the critics as Tom has.
Oh yeah.
I don't have a vitamin supplement line or water, bottled water stuff, but it was all in good fun, and I could tell everybody who came to that thing, they wanted to express some gratitude and congratulations, and I just thought it would be a fun way to mix it up.
Yeah, make it a little less more casual, because I think scientists in general are nice. So I think there weren't any comedians that would really roast you, but some of them pulled a little bit of punches,
Yeah, it was pretty tame.
Okay. One of your hobbies is mountaineering and hiking. How did you get the idea to start Timmerman Traverse, to use this hobby to raise money for research organization like the Damon Ryan Foundation?
Yeah, so this is another long story, but it's I never would have guessed it would play out this way. So I had started Timmerman Report in 2015, and like any startup, it's all-consuming, 100% of my time and attention to get this thing viable and up and running. A couple years in, I had achieved that goal of reaching the 1,000 subscriber sustainability. And I had made some of these lists of most influential people in biotech, and I thought, well, that's kind of nice. But what if I really do have this influence, then the question, and a platform, the question becomes, what do I want to do with it? And I could continue building my business and writing editorials and news stories that sometimes people agree with, sometimes they don't. Maybe it influences positions here and there or on the margins. Any editorial writer will tell you about, what that's like. But I thought, I think I could engage people in direct action on some of the issues that I thought I editorialized about, I thought were important. Wouldn't it be cool if I could, get people in the arena, so to speak, and giving money, giving time, creating some positive change. And so the mountaineering part kind of came in separately by accident. I had been climbing for 15 years, and it was just a personal hobby, something I did with friends. But I once had done a slideshow of pictures from, I think it was Denali, which was like 2012 or 13, the year I climbed that. And it was the most read thing that I had published all year. Oh, wow. So I discovered that, a lot of people are actually interested in this hobby of mine, which I didn't think anybody even cared at all. So I started putting two and two together. Okay, if there's some interest in mountaineering, people say they like to get outside and do things. Could I build off of this? And now it started with me climbing Mount Everest, which is a whole other story we don't have time to get into, but I climbed Mount Everest. I was in a position to do that personally and raise money for the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center in my backyard. So I knew that they were an outstanding place for science. I believed that we were in a great moment for cancer immunotherapy. I specifically spelled out the call for young scientists so again, my journalism had informed me that we had a problem with the next generation of scientists not getting enough support, and that the average first-time NIH grant winner was over the age of 40 now. And so if I could call on the biotech community to raise some flexible funds to help the promising postdocs and early faculty kind of get established so that they could get on track to have successful and productive careers, well, that could be a one way to make a positive difference. So did that with Mount Everest, was able to reach the summit, raised a bunch of money, $340,000, and realized that, okay, I actually can excite and activate this biotech community with my platform. So that got me thinking bigger fundraising campaigns and bringing in groups of people on more accessible type expeditions. So that was the beginning of Timmerman Traverse, which was really in 2019.
It was really cool. And then, with this, you invite different industry leaders to join you, and they have this diverse set of backgrounds and roles. So how do you go about putting a team with these diverse backgrounds, and how do you get all these people to work together and learn? Because a lot of these people are strangers. They haven't met each other before. On the audio for your thing.
Interesting people. And so I get some sense of who I wouldn't mind sharing a tent with. That's something of a funnel. So I think of people who are just interesting, science, business. I talk to people with lots of different types of skills that they bring to this whole enterprise. And so I also thought too about diversity in so there's diversity of thought starting there, but then there's also racial and gender and ethnic, and I happen to encounter lots of people from all these different walks of life, so I'm kind of lucky in that sense that I can draw from such an interesting diverse pool already in so many ways. And I thought, if I could put these people together on a team, that they will enjoy getting to know each other and proverbially, sharing a tent, sometimes literally, sometimes not, but you get the idea. And we will come together around that thing we have in common, like cancer research, supporting young scientists, fighting poverty. There are a couple different things that I've done. We come together around the common cause, and get outside, fresh air, exercise, doing something together for a cause. I think this brings together a whole lot of things that make people happy, and actually I think there's an evolutionary case for this. I think going back to hunter-gatherer days, like what I just described there is something that people have been doing forever.
Yeah. It's meditation.
Yeah.
Shape of meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're there for like a couple weeks, a month, and it really gets you to work together since, you don't have anything else to do. You're away from work. And I believe there's a Traverse happening in a week or so, right?
Yeah, I'm going to Nepal with a
Oh.
team for the Damon Runyon Cancer Research Foundation. So very much looking forward to spending some time in the Himalayas with
Oh, wow.
a great
Yeah.
group of biotech people.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
great. Is this something like you do a lot of mountaineering? Is this something you kind of trained to do, or you're doing this so regularly that you're kind of in the shape already?
Yeah, I'm doing it year round. I mean, I still try to allow some time for personal climbs too. So I do kind of next level training type crazy stuff, which you don't want to hear all about. But so I do that while creating these teams has now become a year round activity. Recruiting the teams, managing them toward their fundraising goals, going on the hike and making sure they have a good experience. All of that is now part of what I do.
Cool. And then the other hikes you do for the Traverse, they're like Mount Everest, Mount Kilimanjaro, which are like on the more extreme side. So you like mountaineering on the other side. Are there like very like more casual places that you've really enjoyed? Like, could you tell us a little bit more about your favorite hikes, outside of these Traverses?
Yeah, well, one small point of clarification. I'm not taking people up to the summit of Mount Everest. It's on an Everest Base Camp trek. So we'll hike to the base camp at 17,500 feet.
Okay.
So people are not actually
Safer.
going to cross those ladders and Khumbu Ice Fall or die of hypoxia. That's not going to happen. But they will feel a challenge of being at high altitude and they'll get the experience of being in the Himalayas and all that. But to other places, I do have a domestic program in the U.S. So for Life Science Cares, have taken people on the Presidential Traverse in New Hampshire, which is 2.5-day program, 20 miles, 7,000 vertical feet of up and down, stay in a couple of rustic huts up on the ridgeline. That's been a really great program. I have now this summer I'm taking people out to the Pacific Northwest, my backyard, and doing some day hikes in the North Cascades National Park. So that is a little shorter, a little closer to home. Still a good challenge, but I think of it as difficult but doable for a person of average fitness and a willingness to work. That's who I'm generally looking for. People don't need to have long experience of doing all kinds of crazy outdoor adventures. So that makes it more accessible, but then people still have to strive. They still have to work to achieve the individual and team goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's nice that you're in the Pacific Northwest because it's very much known for this like terrain, and there's tons of beautiful mountain ranges like the Cascades, Rainier there.
Yeah, you should come out and hike sometime.
Yeah,
sure.
We've been talking about that being fun. We're not really like, at least I'm not a hiker, but it's something
Yeah.
we've seen other scientists do, so we're open to it.
Yeah. So currently in biotech science overall, there's a lot of like uncertainty with funding in the U.S. How do you think the U.S. biotech pharmaceutical companies will respond to this uncertainty to make sure they can still develop transformative medicines and innovation, keep innovation?
Yeah, this is a really good and timely question. Everybody is wrestling with this one. I think in the short term, we have not really seen the industry speak up very loudly on behalf of the academics and what's happening. I think they are concerned behind the scenes for sure for the long-term health of the industry because, as you know, this is where a lot of the inventions, the ideas come from, the people who do the work, who start companies, who learn and grow, who populate large pharma companies. So in the short term, I think there might be an opportunity for the industry to hire a bunch of people who may have been displaced or maybe are looking for greener pastures, so to speak. And there is an opportunity for the industry to create the conditions to do some more science. That said, industry is not in the business of doing basic science. I mean, they have shareholders, and they need a higher probability of success than the really basic learnings of genes and cells and pathways. And that, has been funded by philanthropy and government, but primarily government. And so I think in the short term, the industry might not be harmed too much by some of the things happening at NIH. The FDA is still very much an open question. If they suffer really deep cuts and a lot of qualified people leave, that very well could create a bottleneck for new applications, slowing things down. And that is definitely a major concern to companies in the near term.
That's a good point. I think like industry will respond, but I think it's one of those things where it's a lot of people are resilient, so we're hoping they'll be able to bounce back. And you've been covering this industry for about 20 years, and you kind of seen the highs and lows throughout the years. So how do you think like these kind of trends kind of compare to what we're seeing now? Because we're obviously writing the trends of like mRNA, CRISPR therapies, and we're at this perceived, okay, maybe it's going to get low. Like, what do you kind of predict happening now?
So it's really a volatile time. The science and the technology have never been better. I mean, it's back to 20 years ago when I just didn't have the opportunity to write about so many really impactful new medicines. So when I say the science, it's the speed of learning. Like preprint publications now are coming out all the time. The volume of new knowledge that's being created and then communicated and then built upon is just moving much more quickly. And that's good. Like we're learning very quickly. The technologies to gather all different kinds of biological data are just much faster. They work at lower cost, so the capacity for just in asking and answering questions is just far better than it used to be. So, and we're seeing some of that translated into things like the mRNA vaccine for COVID, but there's a bunch of others. So CRISPR, that we went from the basic discovery of CRISPR to a medicine that was FDA approved in 10 years. That is just much faster than whatever happened in the past with monoclonal antibodies or other previous modalities. So I'm confident that there's just this very auspicious moment in biomedicine. And at the same time, we have this problem with how we pay for the medicines, how we finance them, the cost, the time and expense, on average, is still too high for developing a new medicine. So like the idea that only 1 out of every 10 drugs that enters clinical trials comes out the other side as an FDA-approved medicine, that success rate is too low. That needs to come up. And I hope and believe that because of what I just said, the science and technology, that's going to improve. But we're not there yet. And investors want to see that. So we're in a rough patch for sure. But if we could get to the other side where, say, 20-25% of medicines are now coming out the other side successful, well, that changes and improves the investment math. And that's how the cycle, I think, will rebound.
Yeah, I think now with more of the technologies, innovations in AI, it's like the hope would be the industry could be more efficient to kind of help with, increase that percentage.
Well, we are gathering the essential grist for the mill to feed the AI. It will take a while, but I think there will be a moment where we're just continuing to feed, and figuring out how to integrate the data in an intelligent way and fill in some of the gaps that we've always had. And then, and I don't know how far out this is, don't quote me on it, but then the AI will become much more useful.
Okay.
Great. Cool. That was great to hear kind of the 20 years of you covering biotech, and going back to Timmerman Report now being 10, it's grown a lot in those 10 years. So we're wondering you talked a little bit about different kind of formats to think about covering news, but how do you think it's changed as it's grown? I imagine you really still want to get at that personal feel, but you're much busier now as it's become 10 years old.
How has Timmerman Report changed?
Yeah, you can imagine the next 10-year anniversary. What do you want to achieve?
Oh,
next
boy.
Anniversary
TR20
celebration.
Well,
TR20.
You're putting me on the spot there, Fong. I would love to be able to say that I fostered greater public understanding of biotech. And these past 10 years, I've been able to achieve a sustainable platform that has kept me in the game. I'm definitely still in the game. But I can't say, because I used to write this in my performance review to my boss at the Seattle Times, my first couple of years on the biotech beat. I want to foster greater public understanding of biotech. And at that time, it sort of meant, well, I'll write some good stories, and maybe a few of them will get on the front page and maybe get picked up by local television, and we will make an impact. So I've been doing this for 20 years. I can't really say that I can spike that football in the end zone just yet. But 10 years out, maybe there will be some way to measure that and say, I don't know. I mean, it won't be just me. It will be a whole bunch of other science journalists and practitioners, people, men and women in the arena who work on this long-term project of building better bridges to the society that ultimately sustains the whole scientific enterprise. We got a lot of work to do in kind of rebuilding those bridges, rebuilding trust. It won't happen overnight. It won't happen from one person, but I would like to be one of the people working on that project.
Love to hear.
Yeah. It's not one person's job, but I think you're doing a lot with the Timmerman Report
project,
as well as the long run as well, which has been growing really popular. So, and also for appearing on podcasts such as this as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys having me here and reaching out to your audience of next generation biotech entrepreneurs. I mean, I can only imagine the cool things that your listeners are working on, and I'd love to find out more about them and tell and translate things to that wider world.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely would be the case. And we want to thank you also for taking the time to be on the podcast in person while you've been making the trip from Seattle to Boston. And, we're very busy with the hike coming up in a week. So we really appreciate you and also the support from the club over the years as well.
Yeah, well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Hi everyone, that's the end of this episode for the Harvard Griffin GSAS Biotech Club's The Pulse podcast. I want to thank Fung for helping co-host and produce this episode, and I want to thank everyone for listening, and please stay tuned for our next episode.